Decision rule is the next one. To make it realistic, you have to provide a decision rule. You would say, we did ours, one of the ones we did as a referendum. We are asking all the people in this particular area, and if 60% vote yes, we will impose this particular cost. So what is the decision rule? Is it just whether I myself say yes or not, I might have to pay it, or is it the majority? So you have to provide a realistic decision that triggers the payment versus not. The more real you can make the situation, the more likely you're going to get a range of values that realistically reflects willingness to pay and the total value of the particular good that we're talking about. So you could use a referendum, some sort of voting. What else have I got here? Good enough for that. Okay. And the last one is time frames. Is this going to be a one-time fee? Or are they going to have to pay it annually? If you think one-time fee, you have a price that you have their willingness to pay for a particular good or service. If this is going to be an annual fee, then you're going to have to add up the values over time and discount them. So the time frame is important. Is it going to be a one-time? Is it going to be annual? Is it going to be weekly? Is it going to be per use? So there's lots of different ways you could do it. Per use, annually, one time. Okay. The next one, F, is the response format. This is basically how you ask the question. And this is fairly detailed, so I won't go into all of it. But how am I going to ask what the willingness to pay is? That's what I want to know. I can do it many different ways. I can say, here's the scenario. I've described it. I'm going to ask you whether you're willing to pay a higher tax or not. So I can just say, what's your number? Let me know what the number is. How much are you willing to pay? And they can say $5 or they can say $5 million. So that's open-ended. You just ask them and they give you a number. Okay.
What if they're not?
What?
What if they're not willing to pay?
They can say 0. And you have to record those zeros because you want to know whether people are protesting, whether they just don't like taxes, or if their value is actually 0. And that's valid. Yep, 0 is a valid number. So the open-ended just says how much. The other one, which is probably used more often, is what we call dichotomous choice. Dichotomous choices.
Give them options with ranges of values, or?
Close, but a good die. You get 2. Are you willing to pay $50? Yes or no? So you have 2 choices, yes or no.
Yes, blah, blah, blah. No.
You say yes or no. You present some amount of money, and you would vary this in different surveys to get a range. And you ask people, are you willing to pay? Yes or no. And that's, you go back to the referendum. If you say yes, and 51% of the people say yes, then we will implement this. So they have some idea that this is real, that it could be real. So, what could be problems between these two? Or these two, open-ended and dichotomous choice? What if I leave open-ended?
Like they will talk and talk and talk.
No, they just have to give you one number.
Ah.
Yeah. They could,
Yeah.
yeah, they could give you some wacko number, right? Like, how do they ground it in reality? Are you willing to pay? What are you willing to pay? People don't think about these things that often. So this one can be all over the place. The problem with dichotomous choice is you select the numbers. What happens if you select a range of numbers from, say, 0 to 50, because you think that's where the value lies, and it turns out that the respondents really value this from 30 to 300. So you missed the mark. If you miss the mark, the results you get aren't going to reflect, you're not going to be able to calculate the value because you didn't use the right numbers. So open-ended is good because people can give you those numbers, but they can go a bit wild. Dichotomous choice is good because it's yes or no, you make that decision, but you might miss the mark. So there's good and bad with each of these. And the way to get around it is to do focus groups and testing. You pre-test the survey to determine whether you're going to miss the mark or not, to determine whether taxes send people right over the edge. And then you revise it and do it again. Another way is bidding. Are you willing to pay 10? Yes. You're willing to pay 20? Yes. You're willing to pay 30? No. So you keep asking the question in a variety of ways to determine what that maximum willingness to pay is. Another way would be a payment card. You give somebody a card with maybe 15 different numbers on it and have them circle the range themselves. And then when you have that range, you can calculate the values. So there's a number of ways of doing it, and there's positive and negative with each one. Okay. So we'll just cover one more thing, and then we'll talk about other methods. I teach a graduate class in this stuff, and the students in the class have to choose a resource and come up with a survey asking the questions, considering the population, the statistics, how to do the whole thing. So it's quite interesting to see what people come up with. Okay, so problems with CVM. You can see how there could be millions of problems if you don't do things right. Most of them have to do with bias. And perception. So the first one is strategic bias. So this is where your respondent, the person who's answering the survey, perceives some ulterior motive. They think, oh, you're asking me the value, your value of walking the dog in the park? Those assholes are going to put a price on the park and I'm going to have to pay every time I walk my dog. The value is 0, so there. So if I have this perception of an outcome, then I'm going to answer in a certain way. So you need to get around the strategic bias to avoid that hypothetical answer. You really want to know the value. There might not be a fee. We just might want to know what the value of that area is to set it aside, for example. So you have to make sure that the perceptions about who's asking the questions, why they're asking the questions, is clear, so that you don't come up with answers that that have bias. If you do, the numbers that you get aren't going to reflect anything. It's going to be a waste of time and $100,000. So you have to be very careful. Some other biases, starting points. We talked about the numbers that we choose. Vehicle bias, we talked about this already. Perception of whether it's going to be taxes or fees. People are biased based on one or another. And we talked about this as well, information bias. What if you don't present enough information and people don't understand the scenario or the situation? How could they possibly give you a value if they don't know what's going on? So you have to make sure all these things are okay before you send out the survey. And you do that through pre-testing. Another one is hypothetical bias. If you ask a hypothetical question, people are going to give you hypothetical answers. So you have to think about making it real. You do that by coming up with a decision rule, a specific time frame. You make sure that the information you give is accurate and reflects realistic goals. Okay. The last one is operational. Sort of a catch-all. This has, well, it sort of has to do with hypothetical, but you want to reflect a real market in terms of what that value should be in the payment vehicle and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's CVM. What you basically do is you decide what you want to measure. You come up with the questions, the scenarios. You determine who you're going to ask. You have a method, or you're going to do it paper, mail, email, whatever. You test it on some focus groups to see if your numbers are correct. You do all the research beforehand. Then, when you get all this figured out, you administer the survey, get the numbers, and what you wind up with is this. It's a lot of work just to figure out what the willingness to pay is. Based on those numbers that you're asking willingness to pay. So you get a range of willingness to pay, and you can estimate the consumer surplus, that value, under the demand curve. And from there, use the information to set policy, taxes, prices, whatever, or do nothing. So when you read these surveys, or you read the results of these surveys, and they tell you what the willingness to pay is in the consumer surplus, this is what they're referring to. They're estimating the demand by looking at what is your willingness to pay for particular qualities or quantities. Okay? So that's the whole point of doing it. You want to estimate the value of something that is not valued in the market. That's it. Okay. Questions?